Matthew chapter 17. We will continue our series through the book of Matthew this morning. And we'll be looking at a passage that by way of just a glance is just talking about taxes. Not the most enjoyable topic in the world. This text can be confusing. This text can just be talking about taxes by quick glance if we're just kind of giving it a drive-by look. But man, if we really just kind of hang out for a minute and look at the beauties and treasures that this passage has to offer, you will see that it's way more than just what do we do on April 15th. It's way more than just, okay, why is this here? What is the purpose of it? Why would this be in this gospel? And uniquely, this is only found in Matthew's gospel. And so there's really not a whole lot of reference for it in the other three gospels. And so what I would suggest to you, by way of digging and not just driving by, I would suggest to you that this passage speaks on how followers of Jesus are to conduct themselves in the face of earthly expectations. This passage speaks on how followers of Jesus are to conduct themselves in the face of earthly expectations. And so what I want us to do now is just to read these 4 verses together, to pray and ask God's blessing over this time. Verse 24. When they came to Capernaum, the collectors of the 2 drachma tax went up to Peter and says, "Does your teacher not pay the tax?" He said, "Yes." And when he came into the house, Jesus spoke to him first, saying, "What do you think, Simon? From whom do the other kings of the earth take toll or tax? From their sons or from others?" And when he said, "From others," Jesus said to him, "Then the sons are free. However, not to give offense to them, go to the sea and cast a hook and take the first fish that comes up. And when you open its mouth, you will find a shekel. Take that and give it to them for me and for yourself." That is the word of the Lord to his people. Let us pray for his blessing. God, we come to you and we ask that you would help us see the depths of this passage. That is so much more than a lesson on taxes. It is so much more than what it might appear to be on the surface. God, this text, this word that you've given to us is living and active. May you confront us today where you want. May you encourage us and convict us and change us as we look at this text here about the temple tax. In Christ's name I pray. Amen. This leads us to the first point, verses 24 through 26. It's Jesus' lesson on freedoms and rights. Jesus' lesson on freedoms and rights. And so we see in the first phrase a change of scenery. When they came to Capernaum, Jesus and the 12 had been absent for Capernaum for a long time. They were traveling from place to place away from the large Jewish crowds. They had visited the neighborhood of Tyre and Sidon in the district of Caesarea Philippi. 3 of the disciples had been with Jesus on the Mount of Transfiguration. If we were to look back a few weeks ago, we would see this mountaintop climactic moment within the gospel narrative that Jesus allows the disciples to see, a peek behind the curtain, to unveil his divinity, his glory to them on this mountaintop and moment. And what an incredible sight to see at that time, that Jesus, the Son of God, has come to reveal himself to the people of the world, but also on this mountaintop to see that I am God incarnate. I am come, and I've declared myself Lord, and you can to see this in all of my glory. But then we also see the next event as they descend from the mountain. This lesson on faith, this mustard seed moment in analogy. We are reminded that it's not the quantity or how much faith you possess, it is the object of your faith. Are you connected to the power source? Because if you're not, nothing happens. And now we move from the faith movement to the mountaintop, and then Jesus at the very end of that text last week describes his death that is coming. And so we move from death to taxes. Wonderful. I'm glad we're together on that. Okay, fantastic. Felt a little forced, but I'm glad we're here. All right, so after they descended from the mountain, after that moment of faith and a lesson on the mustard seed, after the foreshadowing his own death, I want you to understand that this was not taking place at Capernaum at the time. They walked into Capernaum, and the tax collectors immediately greeted them at the door, as good tax collectors do. They hound you, they ask you for your money, please come and pay it. And so they cornered, if you will, Peter. And what does Peter typically do? Well, he walks into a room mouth first. He may answer quickly, he may have thought this through, but needless to say, Peter is a good one to target. The collectors of the 2 drachma tax went up to Peter and said, "Does your teacher not pay the tax?" This is a trapping question. And we note throughout the entirety of the Gospels that the Jewish leaders and Jesus are at a point of tension. They constantly tried to trap Jesus with these questions, but they trapped Peter. And Peter quickly said, yes, of course he does. We see that this tax does have Old Testament roots. The Old Testament gave a command that at the annual census, each person over 20 years old was to give a half shekel offering to the Lord for the support of the tabernacle. Exodus 30, verses 11 through 16 gives us the root. So this isn't complete fabrication by the Jewish leaders. This is taken from Exodus chapter 30, verses 11 through 16. The Lord said to Moses, "When you take the census of the people of Israel, then each shall give a ransom for his life to the Lord when you number them, that there be no plague among them when you number them. Each one who is numbered in the census shall give this, half a shekel according to the shekel of the sanctuary, half a shekel an offering to the Lord. Everyone who is numbered in the census, from 20 years old and upward, shall give the Lord's offering. The rich shall not give more, and the poor shall not give less than a half shekel when you give the Lord's offering to make atonement for your lives. You shall take the atonement money from the people of Israel and shall give it for the service of the tent of meeting, that it may bring the people of Israel to remembrance before the Lord, so as to make atonement for your lives." And what do the Jewish leaders do with this text? Through tradition and through time, they twist it. The collectors probably did not distinguish sharply, as Jesus did, between things commanded in the law and human regulations superimposed upon the law. Because at that point in time, that was for the tabernacle. And at this point in time, it is for the temple. And we see here the 2 drachma. The 2 drachma and the half shekel were of equal equivalence, and they were roughly equivalent to 2 days' wages. This tax is directed towards maintenance and upkeep for the temple. Of course, that makes sense. The temple has rabbis, has workers, has upkeep and maintenance. The building's not going to take care of itself, and so the taxes are collected from the Jewish people. And understand that this is a purely Jewish tax. This is not a Roman tax. This is not like a property tax or an income tax. This is a Jewish tax for upkeep for their holy building. The tax collectors seem to be more interested in Peter's response than the actual taxes. They wanted to see, does your rabbi pay these taxes? And I want you to understand in this text too, that culturally speaking, the rabbis were exempt from paying the temple tax. And so this was a kind of a backhanded statement towards Jesus, your rabbi. We don't recognize him as a rabbi. We may recognize him as some sort of teacher, some sort of wisdom guy. Morally speaking, he's okay, but we don't formally recognize him as a rabbi in the Jewish hierarchy. He's a pseudo-rabbi, and so we want to know, does your fake rabbi pay the tax? And this is really kind of a test of Jewish loyalty for Jesus, a test of his Judaism. How much do you really care about the temple that you have inhabited yourself, that you have read the Torah from, that you have been around and associated with? All right, the tension between Jesus and the Jewish leaders were high, and this question is just coming from an ugly place. Again, they're doing their due diligence as good Jewish people to question who Jesus really is. If we go back to Matthew chapter 12, Just briefly, there's a discussion over the Sabbath from the Jewish leaders and Jesus. In verse 6, Jesus says something that really grabs the attention of the people. He says in verse 6, I tell you something greater than the temple is here, which is eye-opening and shocking to the people listening. What's greater than the temple? That's our centralized location of worship. We worship Yahweh in that temple. How can you say something greater than the temple is here? If we move to Matthew 21 and kind of take a kind of a sneak peek or preview of sermons to come, Matthew chapter 21, we see the temple courtyard exchange where Jesus drives out the money changers. We see conflict around the temple. Matthew chapter 23 is the prediction where the temple is destroyed. It's destroyed in 70 AD. In Matthew chapter 26, Jesus mentions that the true temple of God will be destroyed and rebuilt in 3 days. Confusing for the listener because they said it took us 46 years to build this temple. How are you going to resurrect it in 3 days if it's destroyed? But of course, they were blind to the fact that the temple, the greater temple, the reason for the temple was standing right in front of them. This statement of destruction is a prophetic reference to his death and resurrection. The greater temple has arrived and you can't see it. But understand, again, if we go back to this temple tax, it's more of a social pressure. There's not really a clear one-for-one in today's Western culture in the 21st century, but the closest that I can think of, and maybe Chris can educate me after, is this. Whenever you go to Walmart, Price Chopper, Aldi, or a drive-thru, there's always this question of, do you want to donate to said emotional cause? It's like a test of your humanity. How much of a heart do you have today? Do you really care? And I always think to myself, you're a trillion-dollar company. Why don't you give a couple dollars? That's when I don't have a heart. So forgive me. This is a safe room full of confession right now. Okay. But this happened to me recently. And maybe you can relate. Maybe this is like a high school year moment for you, a college moment for you, or something a little bit more embarrassing because it's a little bit more recent. I'm going through a lovely drive-thru at the finest Taco Bell establishment in the area. But mind you, it is 10:30 on a Sunday night, so decisions were made. Shame brought me through that drive-thru. And the lovely drive-thru employee was just doing her due diligence. Would you like to donate, round up to the nearest dollar, for said emotional need? Don't you care about the kids? Don't you care about the animals? And I'm like, honestly, not in this moment. I didn't say that out loud because I'm a Christian, right? I'm just going to keep the ugliness in here. Like, not in this moment. I want my spicy potato soft taco and I want to go home. I've had a long day. I don't want to donate right now. Shame brought me there. Shame brought me through that drive-thru and it took me home. I ate my taco over the sink like a rat. Okay, I wasn't very happy with myself. But that's the social pressures that we kind of see. You feel the pressure every time you're asked to donate. You feel the burden, the stress of everything else around you, all these expectations that kind of float around you. And this lesson is really to illustrate this is how we are to demonstrate ourselves as citizens of the kingdom when we are faced with all these pressures and all these earthly expectations. And so, verse 25. He said yes, and when he came into the house, Jesus spoke to him first. This could have been Jesus overhearing the conversation from outside, or it could have been a display of divine omniscience. Jesus has ears. Jesus can listen when conversations are close. But we've also seen records and scenes where Jesus can perceive the thoughts of others, that he can start a conversation by knowing the thoughts that are taking place within the person before the conversation even begins. Prime example here with Peter. Peter, I know what the conversation was about. I'm God, so I know. But also I have ears, and so here's this moment where we can see that there's a lesson to be had. Jesus used a question to introduce an analogy because he wants to teach a lesson. And he does this throughout the Gospels. He does this through questions. He does this through analogy, through parable, and so on and so forth, because he's an excellent teacher, and he's teaching Peter a lesson. He's teaching all of us a lesson. Jesus says, saying, "What do you think, Simon? From whom do the kings of the earth take toll or tax? From their sons or from others?" Verse 26, and when he said from others, Jesus said to him, "Then the sons are free." Jesus wishes to make it perfectly clear that strictly speaking, he is not under any obligation to pay this tax. Royalty in this moment does not have to pay the tax. So imagine with me, just for a moment, you have Princess Jasmine, Prince Eric, insert Disney royalty moment right now. They veil themselves with common street clothes. They walk out of their palace, they walk out of their castle, and they walk among the people. But the people don't recognize them because they're veiled. They're wearing normal clothing. And they run into these tax collectors who are just doing their duty. Hey, in order to keep the palace the way it is, to keep the royal family fed, to keep the castle looking good, you need to pay the tax. You need to give what is due to the royal family so that they can oversee and care for the people. In that moment, Jasmine could say, you obviously don't know who I am. And why would they? They can't see. They're blind to the fact that she is royalty. Right? They're stuck in their blindness. But what Jasmine could exercise is wisdom. In order to not create issue, okay, here's a silver coin. Here's a gold coin. So that I don't cause issue because I know that the taxes are coming back to me anyways. The members of the king's family are not taxed but are maintained by the taxes paid by others. And so the questions that we need to understand was not Jesus the Son of God by nature? Was not the temple his father's house? Was he not in fact greater than the temple, as he has already made mention of before in Matthew chapter 12? And as for Peter, was he not a son by adoption? Peter, you're royalty now. You're with me. You're a part of the family. But just because we have the freedoms and the rights doesn't mean we have to exercise those. We can lay down our rights to do what is right, to make the good and wise decision here. Jesus to Peter is essentially saying, not only am I not obligated to pay this tax, but neither are you, but we choose to conduct ourselves well so that we may be good witnesses to a world that watches how we conduct ourselves. And then point number 2, Jesus' lesson on conduct and provision. Jesus' lesson on conduct and provision. Verse 27, first phrase. However, not to give offense to them. Jesus, with humble submission, knowing he has divine royalty and rights, gives us a great demonstration of meekness so that we would know the blueprint on how to be healthy citizens in the face of earthly expectations. The word for give offense here is the same as scandalize or to scandal. Jesus did not want to cause unnecessary drama, but to do what was right for the people around him. But don't misunderstand this as cowardice or compromise. This is a cultural moment of accommodation. He is accommodating the cultural expectations in this moment in time. Translation, he's picking and choosing his fights well. You have those like holiday time is coming up, Thanksgiving, Christmas, all that is coming up, and so you have family group chats. Right? We're deciding when we're doing things, we're deciding on dates that we're going to go and celebrate these holiday moments. And you have some family that are diverse, different backgrounds, different convictions. And you just see somebody just lob a grenade in a group chat. It's like, I think Uncle Larry's picking a fight with Aunt Susan, and this isn't cute. They need to take it outside the group chat. This wasn't wise. But just because you had the right to lob a grenade in a family group chat doesn't mean you should. We just wanted to know when we were doing Christmas. We just wanted to know when we were doing Thanksgiving. I don't need to know your thoughts and opinions on everything else. Let's just hang out for a minute at Christmas and Thanksgiving things. But what is this teaching us about the kingdom overall, the grander kingdom that is? Well, the kingdom supersedes human authorities and institutions, but it willingly submits where possible in order to highlight the conduct of believers. Paul has this mindset in 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verses 22. Essentially, he says, I became all things to all people so that I may win some. I have the rights and the freedoms, but I know where I need to meet the people. Jesus teaches us on how to be good citizens in Matthew 22. This is more of a kind of a famous discourse about Roman taxes. The principle is still here. Matthew chapter 22, verses 17 through 22. Tell us then what you think. Is it lawful to pay taxes to Caesar or not? But Jesus, aware of their malice, why put me to the test, you hypocrites? Show me the coin for the tax. And when they brought him a denarius, and Jesus said to them, whose likeness and inscription is this? And they said, Caesar's. Then he said to them, therefore render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's. When they heard it, they marveled, and they left him and went away. Peter picks up a similar principle about civil duty and submission and all of these things in 1 Peter chapter 2, verses 13 through 17. Be subject for the Lord's sake to every human institution, whether it be to the emperor as supreme or the governors as sent to him to punish those who do evil and praise to do what is to do good. Verse 15, for this is the will of God, that by doing good you should put silence the ignorance of foolish people. Live as people who are free, not using your freedom as a cover-up for evil, but living as servants of God. Honor everyone. Love the brotherhood. Fear God. Honor the emperor. It's not always easy because we don't always agree with the direction of the federal government, the state government, or the local government. But when we put in perspective that all authority that we see is an extension of God's authority, we live differently. We act differently. Because most of the time when we complain, when we rage against the machine, when we think of taxes and think of ourselves, could I go off grid and just disappear? You ever have like those 10-second irrational thoughts? April 15th of last year was one of those 10-second moments for me. Right? It was the first year I had to pay taxes jointly with a spouse, because marriage, and I saw how much I had to pay back. And I looked to Corinne and I thought to myself, because I'm not brave enough to say this out loud, I get laughed out of the room. What if we just disappeared? Just went off grid, moved into the woods. Maybe I could grow out even a patchier beard and maybe befriend a mountain lion. Could we build a cabin and live off the land? And then I think to myself, an episode of The Office where I see my future, and it's Michael Scott going out into the wilderness, and without Dwight's help would have died in about 12 to 16 hours. No youth pastor, dead, right? 12 to 16 hours in the woods, that's all I got. Not very resourceful. Right? So all of that is in response to how we perceive things as unfair. But really, it's because we're addicted to autonomy and allergic to authority. We are addicted to autonomy, the freedoms and the rights that we possess, and thank God for them. But ultimately, we are allergic to authority. In every aspect of your life, you have to answer to someone. Even if you're a CEO, there's a board that you must answer to. And at the end of your life, you have to answer to God, who is the supreme and highest authority in all of creation. You are not this free, autonomous being as much as you'd like to think that you are. So for us, as we are reminded through this passage, conduct yourself with excellence. When you can say no, say no. But if it's for the benefit of others, be slower to give that no. And we do this by submitting to the authorities around us, even though we may not agree with the authorities placed above us. Verse 27, go to the sea and cast a hook and take the first fish that comes up, and when you open its mouth, you will find a shekel. Take that and give it to them for me and for yourself. This verse is packed with significance. We see Peter, his talents and his training being utilized by Jesus. We see a miracle, and we see provision. Peter was a fisherman by profession. And Jesus says, let me use your talents and training to accomplish a miracle that will lead to this tax being paid. It's like an implication of this passage is that God uses you. All the training, all the skill, all the gifts, all the tools, right? God uses your talents to accomplish his will. That you are not talentless. That you do have skill, that you do have gifts, that God does utilize you. And what a sweet thing that is to be reminded of on a day-by-day basis. We meet numerous people with numerous skill, numerous gifts, and we think to ourselves, I could never do that. Maybe God could never use me in that. Of course he is. He's using you right now where you are. We see a miracle. And it's a weird miracle, but we see a miracle. This is like an incredible sequence of providence unfolding before your very eyes. Jesus ordained that somebody would drop a shekel into the water, that a fish would scoop it up in its mouth but not swallow it all the way. And we see that the fish would swim over to the shore when Peter walked up to cast the hook that would catch that fish. So fishermen, it's in the Bible, fish, right? Okay. But this is the only time we see a hook being used. It's not a net. It's not casting out wide and hoping he finds something. It's use this specific hook for the fish that I have ordained for you to catch. Oh, and by the way, there will be provision in that fish. It's an incredible act of providence and kindness that Jesus uses Peter, the foot-shaped mouth fellow who would talk quickly before thinking. But he says, Peter, I want to continue to use you to demonstrate this miracle, that we would be covered, that we could pay this tax. I think of an illustration from a few years ago, and this is like 10 years ago now. I was visiting Baptist Bible College in Springfield, Missouri for like college days, which is like a preview weekend for interested students or incoming students. It was spring of 2015, and my youth pastor, my mom, and a couple of friends drove from Ohio to Missouri, and it was like 11 or 12-hour car drive in a church van. And we get out, and we go and kind of explore campus, hang out, and then the next day there's a chapel service. Well, with this chapel service, there was this scholarship opportunity that President Milioni gave to all the incoming or interested students. And I told my parents, like, hey, I know I'm going to be here. Like, I know I'm going to move in August. And then we find out that there's an application fee, who would have thought, and an enrollment fee. If I had any sort of common sense, I would have researched that, but I was 19, forgive me. It was $500. I get it. School needs to make money or whatever. But I'm like, unexpected expenses, not ready for that. I'm 19. I don't have $500. Mom, how we looking? And she's like, look, I'll call your dad. We have a credit card, but this was not expected. You might have to wait. I said, okay, that's fine. And we go to this chapel service, and there's like this lottery, this drawing for a scholarship. And I'm like, there's 100 people in here. My youth pastor, led by the Spirit, looked over to his right where I was sitting. He said, you're going to get this. I said, that's cute. Thanks, I guess. Happy wishful thinking. And President Milioni pulls out the slip of paper and he says, Caleb Ivy. And I said, hot dog, mama, we're going home. Like, we are set, we are covered, the price is met. And that was an incredible act of providence, looking back at it. Because God covered my expenses. He provided for me. He provided for my parents, and it was a sign, a true sign from God that I needed to be there. And I'm sure maybe you've had moments in your life where you see God show up in major ways and maybe even the last second, where he provides for a need. Mortgage payment, groceries, maybe you have the unexpected car breakdown, and God shows up. God shows up by way of, this is happening right now, something crazy is happening, or by the community around you. God shows up, and he provides, just like he provided in this moment for the temple tax. It's just an incredible sign and look at God's kindness towards his people. Because it's easy to forget his provision. It's easy to forget that God still moves because we forget in our busy everyday lives that we serve a God who moves and who provides for his people. So I want us to close in a word of application. And I know I've got some time left, but I thought to myself, in January of this past year, I went 52 minutes. So I'd like to give you some time back. As the youth pastor, let me do you this kindness. All right, so as followers of Jesus, and the first application point here, as followers of Jesus, our conduct in the world is not so much about asserting our rights as it is the freedom to benefit and serve others. Even when you have the freedom, even when you have the right, that doesn't mean it's always going to benefit and serve others. Perfect example. Social media. We have the freedoms and we have the rights to go to our keyboards, type up our opinions, and send them out to the real world. That doesn't mean it's always a good decision. I look back on some of my Facebook memories and just say, why? Why you put that out there for like hundreds of people to see? What were you thinking? We do this on Twitter, Instagram, whatever. But is it for the benefit of others? Just because you have the freedom to do it, just because you have the right to do it, doesn't mean it's the right thing to do at that time. The second point is, as followers of Jesus, we are to realize we are a part of the royal family. As followers of Jesus, we are to realize that we are a part of the royal family. Man, this picture is painting something beautiful here. When you don't understand that you're created in the image of God, that you've been given dignity, value, and worth, that you are not accidental, that you're not stardust, that you're not some evolved primate, and that you see yourself and understand that you have been given grace upon grace, that you are a part of the royal family of God, that you are part of his kingdom. What a beautiful reality that is. That shapes the very way that we conduct ourselves. I'm royalty. Not that I'm above anybody else, but that I've been given a new name, that I've been given a new home and a new citizenship, which shapes the very way that I live here. I'm a part of the royal family, and so are you. And Jesus invites you to be free, to become a part of the royal family through faith in his atoning work. Yes, he covered the tax, but he covered your sin as well. Something greater than that 2 drachma tax. He covered that sin. This is a foreshadowing of the greater payment to come. As followers of Jesus, we are to see that God provides for his children. We have a preview here of the effect of Jesus' forthcoming atoning work on the cross. The temple ritual and sacrificial system are to be fulfilled by Jesus' own sacrifice, setting his disciples free from sin's bondage. Jesus knew that the temple couldn't set you free, but the greater one could. That the reason for the temple is here, and that the destruction of the temple is coming. Your only way of finding freedom to become royalty is through his atoning work. The recognition of what Jesus will accomplish on the cross brings us to understand deeply the applicability of his sacrificial death, for which he has paid the price for our sins. Jesus will pay the ransom for our sin with his own life. He covers the tax. He covers the 2 drachma tax for him and Peter. But more importantly, friend, you got to get this. He covers your sin debt to the fullest. Not partially, not with wishful thinking, but in totality. It's easy to look at our mortgage and say, man, I owe so much. It's easy to look at our student bills and say, I owe so much. But I can look at my sin and say, debt-free. I'm free, and I'm free at last. Jesus Christ has set me free. I'm a part of his royal family. And so are you by way of faith into that family. And so what I ask you now is that we would close in a moment of worship, in a moment of reflection and prayer. I want us to think through the beauty and depths of this passage, that it's so much more than taxes, and it's not as confusing as we think it is. If we step back and relax and just hold on for a moment, we can see that as Christians, we are to conduct ourselves in a world that puts all these earthly expectations on us. I'm going to close in a word of prayer, and I want you just to reflect for a moment. God, would you help us see that true freedom is found in Christ alone? That he has come not to pay a temple tax, but to pay for our sin in full. God, we see as citizens of a greater kingdom that we can lay down our rights and our freedoms at times for the benefits of others. God, may we live selflessly in a world that only speaks selfishness. God, may we reflect well today as a Christian that we have been set free. And if you're in this room today and you don't know this King, and you say, hey, I'm too far gone, I'm too messed up, Jesus gives you and extends to you that grace to come, to place your faith and trust in him for his atoning work on the cross, that he lived a life that you couldn't live, that he died a death that you deserved, and on the third day he resurrected, defeated death, defeated the grave, and said, come, trust me, I will pay your sin in full. So God, help us today as we reflect on your beauty, on the hope that you give us in a world that seems so dark and so desperate for you. In Christ's name I pray. Amen.